Ian, I'm gonna get you to start us off. You're going to talk to us about Killing Kelly, which of course is about the death or murder, as some say, of Dr. David Kelly. Talk to us.
Right. Well, it's not exactly a new story,
No.
But it's sort of been rekindled recently by a documentary which was produced by George Galloway and his wife Gayatri. And I bought the DVD and got the thing online on video and got the poster, as you can see behind me, so I personally signed and everything. And I sort of watched through it, and it was really intriguing. And if you know anything about George Galloway, he doesn't sort of like go into anything without having all these ducks in a row. So he gets these facts right and everything. And this documentary has been years in the making. And the final production is absolutely fantastic, and it runs through the whole thing in sequence from basically beginning to end, all to do with the alleged suicide or otherwise of Dr. David Kelly, who was the Iraqi war inspector for the weapons of mass destruction and the claims that were made to justify going to war in Iraq for the second time. And I don't want to go into the documentary too much because there's so much in it that it would sort of like, I don't want to give away clues to spoil it for anybody that wants to actually watch it after this. But it really sort of like raises so many questions, and it just basically highlighted the whole corrupt cover-upness of the whole thing. And yeah, I just thought it was something that was a little bit better than talking about Nicola Sturgeon or any of the rest of these.
Well, the thing is, it's an enduring mystery for us all, isn't it? Obviously, you know, as you say, you know, he was an expert. We know now, well, we knew anyway, even before the Hutton inquiry, that they had sexed up the dodgy dossier to make it seem as if weapons of mass destruction.
Not only had they sexed it up, Sonia, they had actually plagiarized the contents of the dossier, because the content of the dossier wasn't actually written by the security services over here. They had actually got it off the internet from someone else who had written a very similar thing, and they basically copied and pasted it, and they got cut out because of the wrong punctuation and where the commas were and all the rest of it. Now, I wouldn't spoil much else, right? But I tell you,
you can't make this up.
No,
what?
You certainly can't. That's what George would say.
Right.
And he certainly hasn't. So, you know, the dodgy dossier is as dodgy as they come.
Gosh,
and
yes.
You know the person who's behind it, of course. You know, this was Tony Blair and George Bush #2.
Yeah.
Trying to justify. They'd already decided they were going to war, whether there was weapons of mass destruction or not. And that's what they promptly did. And of course, we are now still living with the consequences of that. And Mr. Blair Esquire is rolling in it, and he's in Pandora's box files as well. So
I know, exactly. And Alistair Campbell, of course, we can't forget Alistair Campbell's role in this. And Alistair Campbell is now, you know, they've reborn. He's been reborn as a media darling, and he presents Good Morning Britain and everything. And these people have never been held to account. And many people believe that Tony Blair has blood on his hands regarding this issue. And obviously it happened around 2003, and David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that the dodgy dossier was a lie. So, you know, obviously...
Well, he challenged it. And they had a parliamentary inquiry and everything, and they made Dr. Kelly look like a complete... You know, they really bullied him and tried to box him in. And he did rather well to sort of like come out the way he did, and then a few days later he's no longer, and the circumstances surrounding it are just like fishy beyond belief.
Yeah, exactly. Hugo?
Yeah, but the thing that's striking is there was no kind of getting into the semantics of it. There was no parliamentary vote into the war in Iraq. There was no real scrutiny. It was just, excuse me, here's the dossier, let's go to war. And yeah, you're right, no one's been held account. In the Hutton inquiry, no one was held to account. Tony Blair hasn't apologized. No one's kind of like focused on Dr. David Kelly at all. it's really good that George Galloway has kind of made this documentary, and I watched a trailer of it, and I was just really amazed, and I wanted to watch it.
Same.
So yeah. So yeah, it's interesting that since the war in Iraq, that every time a government wants to go into war or into conflict, there is now a vote in Parliament, and I think that is actually overlooked quite a bit in terms of its value. That we need to value that a lot more than we do. So in 2015, I think David Cameron wanted to bomb Syria, and Parliament said no, and then he didn't, and Barack Obama didn't. So that's a positive consequence from it. But however, according, surrounding the death of Dr. David Kelly, it's really troubling that people haven't been held to account.
Exactly.
And Alistair Campbell has been made a media superstar.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's just awful, isn't it? All of those dead, innocent people. Defer on the chat says, I will never forget the day when I heard that news. It chilled me to the bone, knowing that a government would just kill someone for not going along with Blair's agenda. And that is the reality, is almost everybody believes that this was not a suicide. And Luggerbugs makes a good point, and that is not enough said regarding the death of Robin Cook. Well, Luggerbugs, that is a story for another time, but I absolutely agree with you. That was always very bizarre. Obviously, loads. Dr. David Kelly, another reason Tony Blair should be in prison. Absolutely bizarre. I mean, I've always said, why haven't we had Blair in The Hague? It makes no absolute sense. It is clear that there was subterfuge, that we were misled, deliberately misled, lied to, and yet these people seem to get away scot-free, Ian.
Yeah, well, they did actually get Blair sort of to court to work out whether they were going to prosecute him or not, but it was ruled in the end that wasn't going to happen. And I made a note here of who actually did that. I can't see it now, wherever it's gone. Well, one of the courts, I mean, it was either one of the UK Supreme Courts, the United Nations Courts of Human Rights, decided that they weren't going to prosecute him, which, to my mind, even without any dodgy dossier, what happened in Iraq was more than enough to get him and his cohorts into The Hague. And if the fact that this thing keeps bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and it's been brought really to the surface once again, because some of the people that are in the documentary that George has made are highly credible people. You've got the Right Honourable Norman Baker, who's a former Lib Dem MP.
Yeah, I've interviewed Norman about this issue.
And he's well up on it, and he's not a man that's going to sit down and say something that's not right.
Yeah.
And he knows, and like I say, it's been years in the making, this thing, and they've researched it. They've not gone to all the expense of producing this to have it thrown in their faces. And the other thing is, none of this is contested. Everything that's in that documentary is absolutely true. It's absolute fact.
Yeah.
And Tony Blair's wandering around, with a big smile on his face and a pocket full of money.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Everybody saying hello to you here. Good morning, everyone. Luggerbugs, morning, Hugo and Ian. It's time now. Morning Hugo. Raycan, hi, Hugo and Ian. Hugo, he looks sleepy, says Deefa. Well, I might know why that is.
He's still in his bed.
How were those cocktails last night, Hugo?
They were okay.
Hazy Daisy,
I'm
morning.
Slightly struggling.
Well, you're fine. Hey, you go on holiday after this. Hazy Daisy, morning, Hugo and Ian. Truth time, morning, lads, says Shin. Yeah, obvious murder, obvious message, says Luggerbugs, and I feel it is that it to me, and we're all entitled to our opinion, to me it is an obvious murder. To me it is an obvious message that was sent out there. I mean, I've interviewed a number of people about it, including, as you say, Norman Baker, Ian, and as Norman is not just going to say anything just to get some publicity. He has looked into this thoroughly. He knows what he's talking about. I've interviewed people about even the method that they claimed Dr. David Kelly had killed himself, and they actually claimed, obviously it was like with a butter knife. wasn't it? It was so ridiculous. But
knife type thing. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And it was so ridiculous because it was, I think it was his right wrist. And actually it didn't make sense because he had problems with his hands. So it wouldn't have been possible for him to have logistically been able to have done it anyway. But nobody cares about that. Nobody seems to care about that. It's like, oh, well, he's gone. That's it, all over and done with, you know. And thank you, Peter. Good morning, all. Nice to be with you again. Thank you. And we will come back to Robin Cook at another time, Luggerbugs, because I absolutely agree with you. That was obviously extremely weird because obviously he admitted in Parliament that there was no, what was it? He said that there's no Taliban, not Taliban. What was it? It was something like that. Somebody please remind me. This is a long time ago. Yeah, exactly, Obi. It does. This, you know, inquiries are a joke, waste of money, government controlled excuse makers. And that is the problem with these inquiries, isn't it? Is that they are often government appointed. They are oftentimes just going to say enough so that people feel they've been heard, but not enough so that we start to get people in the dock. Any comments?
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that's the danger we run into with the COVID inquiry coming down the track is it's, you know, it's just a pass for kind of excuses to be made and you know, people not to be held accountable and just say, oh, look, it was a crisis.
Yeah.
And for kind of decisions not to be scrutinized properly. So I think, yeah, inquiries are worrying things, but I think it is quite good that we have inquiries. I you know, if we don't have them, then we can't even get even, you know, the vaguest of answers. So
yeah,
I am for inquiries. I'm not for the bad.
Yeah, I'm for inquiries, but I'm for independent inquiries. I'm for more inquiries, yes, you know, that involves actually the public as opposed to members of the British establishment, because that's what we really need. Because, you know, inquiries, oftentimes all they are is just a way to silence people. You know, just to say, oh, look, we've done something, we looked into it, and that's that. Whereas, and so it just takes us around that same old soup again and again, and we never seem to progress. Ian, last word about Killing Kelly before we move on.
Well, I would recommend them to watch it. If it's all right to give George a plug on the
Absolutely.
show.
Absolutely, yeah, George is fine with me.
You can go to his website, which is georgegalloway.shop.
Yeah.
If you can't find it on there, just go onto Twitter. It's George Galloway on Twitter. And if you want to download the download, it is on Vimeo, and you need to go to Vimeo and put in Killing Kelly, and you'll find it on there. And I would suggest that you don't rent it for £4. I suggest you actually buy the thing for £6, because that way you can watch it as often as you want, and you will want to watch this more than once. I've got the DVD as well, and I must have watched the thing about more than half a dozen times, and every time I see something else in it.
I love that.
It is fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that for any money or anything. I have not been plugged, or it's just that I actually believe this is something that people should see. And I think George deserves the credit, along with all his co-producers, for actually producing it and bringing it back to the surface again, and just refreshing our memory of what actually happened, how it's been covered up, and how nobody's been held to account for it.
Yeah, well done, George. We definitely appreciate that. Hazy Daisy reminds me about what Robin Cook said. He said that Al-Qaeda was a database. That's absolutely right. Yes, thank you, Darren. Good to see the news review team kicking things off. Yes, Cook and Kelly got murdered, no doubt. So get Blair in court now. Obi wants to know, how many cocktails did Hugo bust last night? Oh, and that's classified secret, Obi. We'll look into it.
We'll need to have an inquiry.
Yeah, we'll have an inquiry. Right, let's move on. Julian Assange. This is a story that I've picked. Obviously, the WikiLeaks founder. He's accused of leaking classified documents and conspiring with army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning. He's been in the Ecuadorian embassy since 2012. He avoided extradition to Sweden. He was accused of sex offence allegations, which he's always denied. The charges were eventually dropped. He's now been in Belmarsh prison since 2019. And when he was, and I'm sure many people remember this, he was carried out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London by police. It was a horrible sight. He was in the High Court this week by video link, and basically I was joined by Lawyers for Assange on the Raw Report, which is the evening live stream that we were doing and will continue to do. And this was last, I think, November, and she was saying to me, the things they've done to Assange is unbelievable. There was even a CIA hit on him, and it all sounded literally unbelievable. But anyway, it turns out it is true. And this was talked about in court this week because the US government, Biden's government now, and it was Trump's government, everybody thought that Trump was going to pardon Assange and didn't. And so now it's been passed over to Biden's government, and Biden's government are appealing for Assange to be extradited to the US to face these charges. Well, Assange's legal team is saying if he goes, there's no guarantee that he won't commit suicide. And so they are obviously fighting against that. And as I say, he was in court via video link on Wednesday, and that's when all the revelations finally came to the surface about the CIA. They were planning a hit on Julian Assange. They not only considered killing him, but they spied on his conversations with lawyers. So even if he was extradited to the US, he wouldn't stand a chance of having a fair hearing. So it's all fairly horrendous. This is obviously about press freedom. He was actually revealing details about illegal activity, and they want him. Who wants to go first on this?
You awake, Hugo?
I am awake. Yeah, I mean, it's shocking that America can, the CIA, Biden, Trump can, try and order a hit on a journalist just doing his job. And, just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that, you can order an illegal hit for someone covering illegal activity. It's quite hypocritical, quite ironic in a way. Julian Assange doesn't stand a chance if he leaves and goes back to America. He doesn't stand a chance at all.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he was really worried about his kind of position in England as well, because people out there do want Julian Assange. They do want his head because he revealed some really uncomfortable truths.
Yes.
And
he embarrassed the American government. Yeah. They don't like to be embarrassed.
No.
Well, the thing that really is concerning about it is not only were they considering plotting a hit on him, they were plotting to do it on UK soil.
Yeah.
They were planning to do it in London. They were planning to do it on our territory.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time that Julian Assange has really upset governments, and especially the US government. And I was up at 3 o'clock this morning, believe it or not, watching a documentary that had been recommended to me by a friend in New Zealand. And it was to do with a friend of Julian Assange's called Kim.com. And that's not ... it's DOTCOM. And he was, he's a great big German bloke. He started off life as a hacker whenever hacking first still came onto the scene. And my understanding is he was sort of like very good friends with Julian Assange. And he went to New Zealand and he formed a company called Mega Uploads. And what Mega Uploads basically was a file sharing system, which a bit like Napster in the very early days and LimeWire, when people were using sort of like peer servers to share music, except Mega Uploads was sharing films. And the United States government got really a lot of pressure from the film industry, because effectively this is sort of effectively piracy. The films are being uploaded brand new, and of course people are not paying to watch them. And Kim.com was raking in multi-millions. And what the CIA did was they contacted the New Zealand government with a whole pile of fabricated information, fabricated evidence, in order to get this Kim.com guy stopped. And at the same time, he's still pals with Julian Assange. So the whole thing absolutely reeked. And if any of your viewers later on after this go and have a search on YouTube for Kim.com, and this Australia 60 Minutes Australia did a documentary on him.
Yeah.
It gives you an absolute parallel of what is happening with Julian Assange here and the Americans trying to extradite him from here. As to what they did to Kim.com in New Zealand, and they were trying to extradite him from New Zealand. Fortunately for .com, the New Zealand government stood their ground and told the US, no, sorry, we're not doing that. That's not how we're all here. But it took 2 years and made the man bankrupt, of course. And that was all due to pressure brought on the government by the film producers in America.
I mean, sorry, Ian, go on.
Yeah, but getting back to Julian Assange, I think what they've done to the man over the years is absolutely horrendous. What he's exposed was nothing but the truth. And think about what we wouldn't know had it not been exposed. And the young chappie, the Chelsea Manning guy, that did it. I mean, I'm not sure that was the best move on his part. Certainly, it certainly caused him a fairly serious problem. But then people have a conscience, don't they? And he obviously saw things happening and thought, well, this isn't right, and I'm going to do this. A bit like Snowden and all these people that sort of like think, no, this is just totally wrong. I'm going to blow the whistle on this.
Yeah.
And you look what happens to them. But they've effectively, Assange has been, like you say, he's been incarcerated one way or another since 2012. There was fake charges thrown up by false evidence produced by some guy who's now in jail for being a fraudster over in Sweden. The Swedes tried to get him extradited, and that wasn't happening. And it's just been an absolute nightmare for him. And
absolutely.
He's been incarcerated for this amount of time, either in an embassy, which he couldn't leave, so that's no fun, and 2.5 years in, like,
in Belmarsh. Yeah, absolutely.
Guantanamo on Thames.
Exactly. But it wasn't only him targeted. They also targeted his family, his lawyers, and they targeted his 6-month-old baby to try and steal the DNA. Scotch Mist is not convinced by Julian Assange. Scotch Mist is of the mind, I think, you think in controlled opposition, Scotch Mist. I mean, that is a consideration that people have. I don't personally think that about Julian Assange. They did a number of things. They installed hidden microphones, in the Ecuadorian embassy. It was just horrendous what they did, and at the end of the day, I believe that he is real. Obviously he's real, but what I mean is I believe that what we're told is real. And so to me, this is about the press doing their job and being silenced and intimidated for doing it. And that obviously is a problem. It's wrong. I don't think for 1 second he should be extradited. I think he should be released. He has 2 children. Stella Morris, his partner, has made a number of really important speeches about it. I feel dreadfully for her. It must be a horrendous situation. Obviously they're fighting hard to try and get him released now after all this time. But his life will never be the same again, will it, after all this?
No, I mean, he's effectively served a 16-year sentence already.
Yeah.
And for having been found guilty of absolutely nothing. We all know what's happened, what he's done. He's done his job as a journalist. And the other thing that happened as well is a very strong supporter of him is a Scottish journalist called Craig Murray.
Yes.
He's a former British diplomat, and he's now languishing in HMP Edinburgh somewhere.
Yes.
On the most spurious of indictments of a jigsaw. What was it?
Jigsaw identification.
Jigsaw identification. That's it, and that's
to do with Alex Salmond, wasn't it? And
with one of the witnesses.
Yeah.
And you can't for the life of you. I couldn't. I tried to find out I've read through all this stuff, and there was no. I couldn't piece it together and come up with a name. And the only way that you could come up with a name was to already know the name, and then all the bits that he had said would make sense. So if you knew who it was, thinking, that's that and that. Yeah. But doing it in reverse, it's like trying to crack the Enigma code. They needed a crib, and then they could crack the code. And Lady Dorian, who's the High Court, the High Court judge in Scotland, she's taken it upon herself to sort of like throw the man in jail for, I think it was 8 months, so he'll be out soon. But nonetheless, it's just like, well, you sort of like just think, well, he's supporting Julian Assange, and if you look at the timings of all this as well, where's Craig Murray now? Whenever Julian Assange could do with his help, well, they're both in jail.
Yeah.
And you can't, you can't ignore the facts, because those are facts. They are both in jail for
Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily a direct association, but I believe Craig Murray's been put there because of pressure applied to the Scottish courts.
I will categorically state that I believe Craig Murray is in jail for political reasons. To me, he's a political prisoner. So no, it's okay, Crone. It's okay that you're late again. It's absolutely fine. I saw somebody say Hugo looks wasted. How dare you? Right, Hugo, your story. And Angela Rayner apologises for her Tory scum rant. What's gone on?
So this is the second time Angela Rayner has been caught out calling Conservative scum. The first time was in Parliament a couple of months ago, or a few months ago, where then the Speaker intervened and said, "You've got to apologise," and she did, because it was unparliamentary language. And then a couple of weeks ago in the Labour conference, she said it again, and she said some pretty horrible things about Conservatives, and then tried to backtrack on her comments. And recently, bless her, she's had a bereavement in her family, and she's come back into public life after a couple of weeks off, and she's now apologised for the offence caused and the words of calling apparently Conservative cabinet ministers scum. And I just think this is the second time she's been caught out. I mean, I was demanding for her to apologise straight away. I don't think it should be said. Obviously, in between that and now, we've had the death of Sir David Amess. We need to tone down our politics and our discourse in this country. We need to make it that, like Jo Cox before. She said in her maiden speech in Parliament before she was murdered, we have more in common than that divides us. And we need to kind of bear that in mind and kind of keep that flame alive, really, and just tone down the discourse, take the toxicity out of it. And that's why shows like, Rise are great, because I'm pretty sure if we all sat down, all three of us, with a cocktail and
or five,
discussed our politics, I think we'd all have or five. I think we'd all have very, very different views, but we all get along, and we're all here. So I think she was right to apologise.
Ian?
Well, I think the type of rhetoric isn't what we expect from our politicians. These people are walking away with, including their expenses, roughly on average about £300,000 a year from the taxpayers' purse. And I just think that we deserve better than that. They shouldn't, if that's the level of their education and their command of the English language, then they ought not to be where they are.
I mean, I'd like to point out at this stage that when the coalition, the Lib Dem and Tory coalition of 2010 and in 2012, when they were pushing through the Welfare Reform Act, they constantly used the most horrendous language about people, spongers, I mean, I can't even remember all of them, but it was really demonizing of people who were on benefits, and the press picked that up. And then you had like Channel 4, Channel 5 delving into their sort of poverty porn programs where they demonize people on benefits. So actually, the Tories and politicians have done all this to the people previously, and now they're concerned because the people are standing up. My only concern about us creating a climate where we can't criticise MPs is they're doing all these mad, insane things. They're passing laws that is basically, a sort of boot on our faces. And we're being sort of coached into a place where to criticise them is to be complicit should anything happen to them. And that worries me. So Hugo, it's your story. Tell us something final about it.
I think that's really important, what you just said about kind of politicians being held to account. I do think that, no, I don't think we know that, if you don't like a politician, you've got the opportunity, and we live in a democracy, and we should be very, very grateful of that. We've got the opportunity to vote out whoever we don't like. So just wait, what, a year or 2 or 3, and we'll have an opportunity to vote out the people that you don't want to stay in there. So yeah, you know, you've only got a limited time with these people if you want it.
Yes, I'd rather not. I've lost all faith. I'm completely politically homeless, but that's another story for another day.